Alright, Facebook fam, I'm back at y'all once again. This is part 5 of my Savior's Day speech / Harvest for the World. Okay, I was in the book of Matthew chapter 2, verse 13 through 17. I was speaking of Herod when he said that he was mocked of the wise and was exceeding wroth, and set forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and all the coast thereof, from 2 years old under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Okay, now we know that Herod, which symbolizes the minister Louis Farrakhan, was out to slay the child. Mary symbolizes the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the woman that gave spiritual birth to that army of believers through the foundational teachings of universal law. So Mary was to give birth to a child. Okay, now if we refer back to Revelations, we know that the woman in heaven, which symbolizes the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and that army of believers, okay, the FOY, the true believers in universal law, the will of Allah. The woman appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she being with a child, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another one in heaven, and behold, a red dragon, the minister Louis Farrakhan, Esau, stood before the woman, which is Jacob, and the true believers on the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. 7 heads, the minister Louis Farrakhan. Remember, the head of the spiritual world, the head of the Caucasian world, we got 2 heads, the Pope of Rome and the minister Louis Farrakhan. Okay, the Pope of Rome is the head of the Christian world. The minister Louis Farrakhan is the head of the spiritual world, is the head of all religion. Okay, they use the minister Louis Farrakhan is their spiritual guide, because the minister Louis Farrakhan is a black man. He has the nature of righteousness, which he rebels against, but he has the nature of righteousness and is able to bring forth vision. Okay, so now the red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and his hair drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad and that army of believers, the FOYs, those first converts, stood before the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered to devour her child as soon as it was born. So it's the same with Herod. Herod stood before Mary. Mary was about to give birth. Mary symbolizes the woman. Mary symbolizes the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and that body of believers about to give birth to a child. Okay, and then it says in Revelation chapter 12, verse 5, it says, and she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. So now, we know now that the reason why the minister Louis Farrakhan, Esau hated Jacob and stood before the true believers in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and oppressed the true believers and murdering all the prophets, ordering all these hits against all these prophets, Malcolm X, Khaled, all these other brothers that lost their lives in the Nation of Islam in the struggle, trying to further advance and propagate the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. These brothers lost their lives, so now we know why, because it was a child that was to be born. Okay, the Herod stood before Mary to destroy the child as soon as it was born, because this child was to be a special child. Okay, this child was to be a child that was to rule all nations. Okay, so the minister Louis Farrakhan thought that Malcolm X would be that child. He thought that Khaled was to be that child, and all the other prophets. This is why he went along and oppressed all the true brothers in the Nation of Islam that was believers in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that built all these different mosques upon the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. They oppressed and went to war with these brothers. Okay, we know that a child was to be born that was going to rule all nations. Okay, so the minister Louis Farrakhan thought that Malcolm X would be that child. But Malcolm X was not that child that was to take over and be the ruler and unlock the 7 seals. Okay, now let us move on. Let me make sure my device working good, because I want y'all to hear the truth. I want y'all to hear the gospel today. Y'all gonna get it from the Kaaba Kashif Muhammad, the stone that the builders rejected. Okay, now let's move on. If we go to Revelation, if we go to Revelation, no, we go to the true history of Elijah Muhammad, page 238. And 239. Okay, this is what Elijah Muhammad says. And it says that this particular dragon, or the devil here, stood before a woman, was ready to be delivered, to devour her child as soon as it was born. This woman who the dragon stands before can easily be understood. If the dragon is people, and the woman has got to be people, and if he stands before her, it means he is hindering her as one is in front of another to impede the other's progress in the race or in going forward. This is what it's referring to here, that the dragon stands before the woman. The dragon symbolizes the minister Louis Farrakhan and his ministers and body of believers, and the woman stands symbolizes the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his army of believers. Okay, now the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says that this is what it's referring to here, that the dragon stands for the woman, stands before the woman to impede her progress, to destroy her progress in delivering her child as she had planned. Now the woman stands for a messenger of God who is pregnant with the conversion or the resurrection of a people or a great nation of people. It could refer to the coming of God in person, and that the dragon is hindering God or stand before God to keep him from performing his purpose or duty of delivering the people who is not ready to be delivered. Let us look at this again, at the possibility of such dragon hindering the birth of that child and his evil intentions to devour it as soon as it's born. The dragon watches it. He's before her, and he intends to be at the birth of the child, because he doesn't intend for that child to be born and grow up. So he's waiting for the birth of this child in order to destroy it as soon as it is born. That will keep it from growing and coming into maturity. If it ever comes to maturity, then he will not be able to destroy the child. So he wants to get it in its infancy. This refers to us here in America, if we understand. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad breaks down the dragon, which symbolizes the minister Louis Farrakhan and his ministers that stand before the woman. Okay, this is the book, The Black Stone, True History of Elijah Muhammad, page 238 through 239. Okay, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad broke that down and told us that the dragon stands before the woman because he don't want the dragon to give birth to that child, because he knows that child is for a specific reason. That child is to be born for a specific reason, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad tells us that he wants to impede her progress or to destroy her progress in delivering her child as she had planned. Now the